Welcome to the 100th episode of the podcast. First off, thank you for being along on this journey with me. It has been nothing but fulfilling for me. I've learned so much. It's been fun hearing all the stories of you guys getting after it. And today's theme of the episode, we'll talk a lot about the 100th episode, things that I've learned, and other lessons. But the main theme goes with any pursuit that you're going after, and it's been the cornerstone of this podcast: consistency. Here's the thing: consistency alone isn't enough. It's not just about showing up every day. That's not it. It's about showing up and doing the right things. Consistency with purpose. That's what has brought this podcast to fruition, and it's been a huge part of my personal growth journey up to this point. So, welcome. Let's jump in. Guys, welcome back to the podcast. Welcome to the 100th episode special. Actually, there's nothing really special going on, but it is a big milestone for me. This 100th episode, I don't think many podcasts get to, and it's humbling, honestly. I've had so much fun during this journey. I've learned so much. I've grown in a lot of ways. It's fun hearing stories about other people getting after it and doing what they are passionate about, but it got me thinking what's made me want to do this for so long, because it's been about 2.5 years where I've done 100 episodes. For me, as I was thinking about it, it's consistency. Because at the beginning of the podcast, I would do one on a weekly basis. At least I would try. But then when I started dating my wife, my now wife, I kind of slacked off a little bit because I was like, I want to spend a lot of time with her. I don't want her to think I'm putting the podcast above her, all this kind of stuff. But I think I just use it as an excuse, so I don't know about that. But anyways, consistency has been what's gotten me across the finish line on this thing. Not finish line, because we're not done. But it is such a powerful and interesting concept, because with consistency, you can be consistent with a lot of stuff. But if it's the wrong things, if you're being consistent with doing the wrong things, then it's not going to be beneficial for you. Same goes for this podcast. I've learned so many lessons about, what kind of content people actually like, what they listen to, what gets them excited and interested, and make some changes in their own life. This whole podcast has been a interesting opportunity for me to think back on my life, on lessons I wish I would have learned when I was younger, and then applying that to these lessons and these teachings that I do. And it's been so fun. It's been really rewarding, and I've had to be consistent. But the key is you can't just be consistent. Like I said, if you're doing the wrong things on a regular basis, that's not going to move the needle. Consistency without strategy leads to mediocrity. Like if you're just doing the same thing every day and you're cool with that and you're happy with the outcomes that you're getting, it's probably mediocre. But if you're consistently refining where you're at, working on your strategy, trying to become the best part of, or the best person that you can be, and working to become that, then that's what you should be doing, right? So let's define consistency with purpose, because I mentioned it a little bit. Consistency often gets praised as the golden ticket to success, right? You've heard it many times, but let's be honest, it's only part of the evaluation. Like I was saying, you can't be consistent in bad habits, or you can be consistent in bad habits, I apologize. And guess what? That'll take you further down the wrong path. So if you listen to my last episode, I talked about the Cheshire Cat from Alice in Wonderland. If you don't know what path you're going down, who cares what path you choose? But if you have a vision for your life, you should choose the actions that get you one step closer to that path. This is from that tweet I read on X about consistency without strategy. But this guy, Dark Arts of Life, don't know, that's a weird handle, but he says this: most people confuse motion with progress. Doing the wrong thing every day for 12 months doesn't lead to success. It leads to stagnation. So if you're not moving the needle, if you are consistently doing the wrong thing for 12 months and you think, oh man, I'm going to be huge on my goal, I'm going to achieve that thing in 12 months and I'll be sitting pretty. That's probably false. You probably won't be, and you might be a little sad with the results that you get. So you have to know that's why I recorded before this, beginning with the end in mind, because once you begin with the end in mind, your actions have to be consistent, and they need to be consistently evaluating where you're at. So let's talk about strategy for a second. The first step in mastering consistency is defining what your strategy actually is. When you set a goal, you need to know the why behind it and the how. Like, you need to know what you're going to be doing to achieve it, and you need to know why you're trying to achieve it in the first place. So beginning with the end in mind, I recorded a podcast on that, but pretty much visualize where you want to be in the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. But just set a vision for where you want to be, okay? And then break down your goal into actionable daily steps. So if we want to take running for an example, I love to run. I need to break down my training on a daily basis. Like, okay, I know on Monday it's 5 miles, on Tuesday it's 10, on Wednesday it's another 5, on Thursday it's 10, another 5, and then a long run on Saturday. But breaking it down into daily actionable steps makes it a little bit easier to understand where I'm at in my goal, the progress I've been making towards it, and how I can refine the process. Third, create checkpoints to evaluate your progress. And I think this could look like many things. A checkpoint could be just a little, time where you spend every Sunday reflecting on where you're at, on the things that you've done, and the progress that you've made towards said goals. And that's fine. Like, it doesn't have to be anything crazy. Maybe Sunday's your weekly checkpoint to see if you're making any progress. For me, I like a daily checkpoint. And so that's journaling. That journaling has been such a great help for me understanding actually what I want out of my goals and for being consistent, because then I can evaluate my own actions. And I journal a lot about this podcast. I talk about things that I am covering, lessons I've learned. Even if I get feedback, I mark it down to try and make sure that I either improve or continue doing certain things that people like or they don't. And I always try and make sure I'm listening to my podcast after I publish it, because then I can go and listen and hear like, okay, well, I said quite a bit. Or one thing I'm working on is I say and a lot, and working on that. So stay tuned. We're getting better. But every time I upload an episode, it's like a checkpoint for me to listen to the content that I'm making, see if it's getting better in either my own terms or in someone else's suggestions. Checkpoints are good. They help you understand where you're at in progress. So keep doing that. There's I wrote a blog about this, about beginning with the end in mind, and then also about consistency. But in the blog I wrote, am I beginning with the end in mind? What daily steps move me closer to my vision? How do I evaluate and reevaluate my actions? Those are all questions that you should be asking yourself on a regular basis, if not daily. Like, you need to make sure that you know where you're at on all these things. And you should be very self-aware with your decisions, with your actions, with your beliefs, and where you're making progress. Because asking yourself those things leads to growth. And growth is not comfortable, guys. You have to make some serious changes if you want to be who you want to become, because I guarantee that person who you want to become requires things that you've never done. And it shouldn't be a negative thing at all. You should be excited about that. You should look at it as an opportunity to say, hey, you know what? I'm not where I need to be. I'm gonna get there. But it's going to require some self-evaluation. I've used this strategy in my own podcast journey. Like I said, am I beginning with the end in mind? Going back to what I want this podcast to be, I want it to be a resource for people to learn and to get key points and elements that they can take from this and apply it to their lives and see success. Because these principles I talk about all require action. But from me and from countless others, they work. The principles work. When I say begin with the end in mind, it's not just a nice little thing to say. It actually works if you do it right. And asking yourself questions is a form of self-evaluation, a form of checkpoints, whatever you want to say. But with the podcast, I always ask myself, is this something I'm proud of? And if it's yes, then I publish it. If it's not, then I don't, and it goes in the trash. But you have to set guidelines for yourself and standards for yourself. And when you set those standards, you need to uphold the standard. You need to be rigorous in that, actually, because that's the only way that you can continue to grow, is if you uphold your standards. evaluate where you're at, make improvements when needed, but make sure you're doing what you say you are. Otherwise, you're lying, and that's bad. So if you want to start small, if you want to see if you can be consistent and challenge yourself with consistency, set a challenge for 90 days. The first 30 are going to suck, by the way. But the next 60, you'll start to get a groove. And then by the end of 60 days, so you have 30 left, it's going to feel like it's pretty easy. It's true to who you are now, right? But just try and outline 3 to 5 daily actions that you can take to make that goal happen. So if you have a fitness goal, you want to lose 10 pounds in 3 months, 90 days, take some actionable steps. Work on a fitness or a workout program, exercise program. That could be walking, it could be biking, it could be lifting weights, it could be gymnastics, you could go do Zumba, whatever. Think of an actionable step. 2, that could be another one, a meal plan. Like make sure you're holding true to that. But think about a goal that you want to set for 90 days and then write how you can take small steps every day to get there. Because with this podcast, it didn't start big. I've learned so much over the years. That's crazy, man. 100 episodes get you in your feels, you know? But I've learned a lot of lessons over the years, and the content has gotten better. I can say that without a doubt. There was an episode, you can go back and listen to it. It's still up, but episode 8 was Stan Watts. I had this little mixer table that I don't know, because like I said, I had no idea what I needed to record a podcast. So I went and bought a mixer table, which is like something you plug microphones into and has sound effects, and you can change all the audio levels. Again, nothing I knew anything about, like didn't know what hertz they needed to be on, anything. And so I'm sitting there with Stan, and we have this really nice episode 8. Like I said, you can go listen to it, but we're talking, and Stan shares stories about how, his dad passed away and he learned so many lessons from him, and he's taken his dad's, his name, and he's created a business off of it. He has a Jaybird Auto Detail, like all these things. And he's telling this super heartfelt story. And at the end of the podcast, I was like, dude, that was great. And I go home and I start looking at the footage, and I realized the audio mixer thing that I plugged our microphones into had an auto-tune feature that was on the entire time. And so we sound like T-Pain, and he's telling this super heartfelt story, talking like this. Like, it's hilarious. But, like, it's just fun seeing the content get better over time and the podcast audio quality getting better. And, like, I have those pieces of evidence that I know it is getting better, and there's always room to improve, right? But that's the same for you. Like, you'll look back on your journey and say, man, just like me with the episode 8, you'll say, man, I couldn't even run a mile, and now I'm running 10 on a regular basis. Like, whatever the goal is for you, but things are going to come up, and you're not going to be the best in the beginning, and that's fine. Like, I definitely have not, I wouldn't even say I'm a great podcaster now, but in the beginning, I was terrible. If anything, I was so bad. And one thing to note is, like, hey, whatever goal that you have in mind, realize it's okay to be a beginner. Everyone's a beginner at the start, right? Like, anyone is. Elon Musk shot rockets out of his backyard, and now he shoots them into space. So that should tell you something. Let's talk about understanding if your actions are worth repeating. What does that mean? Well, consistency has 2 sides that I've found. It can either hold you back or build you up. The secret lies in ensuring that your actions are worth repeating. You need to audit your habits. So for me, I have a habit of having an idea about a podcast and then sitting down and just trying to, or I had a habit of sitting down and just trying to record. And my thoughts would go all over the place. I would talk about running, then I would talk about my faith, and then I would talk about an experience I had when I was a 2nd grader, and then I talk about how I was fat in 5th grade, like all these random things, but I would just bounce around from ideas. And so that, like, I had this habit, but I realized it was not good because the content didn't reflect what I wanted it to. And so it was more just me rambling about happy things that happened to me or lessons that I wish I would have known, right? So all these things. But until I actually sat down and made it a habit to outline what I wanted to talk about prior to every podcast, it started to take shape. and it started to get a little bit better every single time. And the more I focus on the prep before, the better the content ends up in the end. The inputs dictate the outputs. Same goes for you. Your inputs dictate your outputs. It's like with AI. Let's break it down. How does AI work? Well, the more inputs it has, the better outputs it can provide, right? So if you give it, let's say you say, hey, I want to write a podcast. I want to do a essay. Let's say an essay. I want to write an essay about fish. And then you say, okay, write me an essay about fish. It's going to be very general. It's going to say, there's fish in the ocean. There's fish in fresh water. They're in the river. They're in aquariums. They're all over the place. There's different types. There's sharks. There's catfish. You can have a blowfish, whatever. Like, it's going to give you something very general. But if you say, hey, write me an essay on how many different types of trout there are and where they live, the types of lakes that they live, how much meat come off the bones, whatever. I don't know. You can get super detailed, but the more inputs you give it, the more specific output it will give. And the same goes for you with your actions. So with auditing your habits, be open-minded that you might be doing the wrong things. And if you are, good job. You just found something that you can improve on. It's like with this. Like, learning that I had to write outlines and get my thoughts at least in order before I talk about them has helped me tremendously. But it's only, I had to know that the habit of sitting down and just trying to record was not a good one. It was not quality. And now it's getting a little bit better. But evaluate, adjust, execute, rinse, and repeat intelligently. Evaluate, adjust, execute, rinse, and repeat, but intelligently. Intelligence is the ability to change one's behavior. And I was thinking about this, like, are your actions worth repeating? So I wrote on my blog post, I gave an example about running, how running is pretty general, like you can have certain distances or whatever, but I specifically was talking about fueling for runs. If you fuel for a 10-mile run like you would a 5-mile run, you're not going to perform as well as you would. But if you fuel for a 5-mile run like you would a 10-mile run, again, you won't perform as well. So you need to evaluate your actions. And fueling, I think, is a good one because it requires repetition, at least for running. Like, you need to be consistently eating. You need to make sure that you time your carbs or proteins right when your runs are leading up. So like the day before you have a longer run, you want to eat kind of a larger amount of carbs just to get your body filled up with, it's not glucose, what gets in your muscles. I can't remember. But whatever's in your muscles, maybe, yeah, it is muscle glucose. Your muscle glucose is going to be tapped off, and then you'll be able to run further distances, right? Now, the same approach goes for a marathon versus an ultra. Like, if you fuel for a ultra marathon like you would a regular marathon, you're going to be in some tough shit. Like, it's going to be hard. You're going to realize you're cramping. You're not going to have as much energy. You're going to feel weak at times. And so you need to evaluate, adjust, and execute accordingly and intelligently. Like, just be cool with that. One thing that I focused on, like, this is something that I've been trying to make more of a priority for the podcast, is sharing the stories of others. Because I think I know, a pretty good amount of getting after it. I know that, I know what it's like to push yourself, how to do that, how to be consistent, how to show up when you don't want to, like all these things that are important if you want to get after your goals. There is immense benefit, though, when I sit down and talk to someone who has a completely different life, who has completely different circumstances, but it still gets after it in their own way. Because I realize that the way I get after life and the way I get after my goals is going to be different from you. And that's how it should be. We have very different goals, you and I. And that's okay. Your life is meant to be lived by you, not me. And so our goals are going to look different. And so when I sit down and I talk about other people, or I talk with other people about their life experiences, the things that have shaped them, the lessons that they wish they would have learned at a younger age, whatever the story is, it's always eye-opening that, they handle situations different than me. And sometimes I'm like, I'm going to try that next time. Like, my buddy Karsten was just on, and he was talking about how when he was at home, after he got back from his mission, he was about to go to college. He started a workout program called German volume training, where he would do 6 sets of 6, 7 sets of 7, 8 sets of 8, like 9 sets of 9. These are all on different days, but eventually like 10 sets of 10 reps. It's called German volume training. And he talked about how he went from benching just the bar and a 25 on the side to being able to bench 315. Obviously, there's months that played into it, but it shows you the power of consistency. It shows you the power of, adjusting your actions. Because if he just did 6 sets of 6 with the bar and 25, and he wasn't challenging himself with more volume or more weights, he'd still probably be benching just the bar and 2 25s. And there's always times when you need to refine your strategy, refine your habits, and that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. If anything, it should be showing you that you're making progress because you need more. You need more. I don't know what the word is, but in Karsten's example, you need more volume to get to the strength that you want. So evaluate yourself. I think the most effective form of consistency is being adaptive. You need to evaluate your actions, evolve your strategies, and embrace intelligent repetition. James Clear says, I say this quote a lot, but you don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. So however you set up your life to make sure that you're achieving your goals, it is dependent on your systems for them. Now, the evolution of the podcast, I want to talk about that for a moment because the most effective form of consistency is being adaptive. The evolution of the podcast has adapted quite a bit. I now do video podcasts. I now use much nicer microphones. I work on the content rigorously before I record. All these things that go into what makes it the podcast that it is today is very different from where it came. I now have more guests than I ever have before. And again, they help share their stories, and it helps me learn and grow in my own ways. I read a lot of books. Before, I read books, but I didn't study them, so I couldn't particularly get my point across that I was trying to make from them. And it's this constant battle of asking yourself, am I doing good enough? And then being proud of the work that you do. Because the actions that you take today, even if you don't evaluate your decisions and you just try and take a step towards your goal, you should be proud of that progress. If you're just doing the bare minimum, but that's new to you, keep doing it until you need to readjust and up the ante a little bit. You need to give it a little bit more fuel. That's the thing, is if you want long-term success, you need to start small and then adapt when you need to. Like when you have hit a milestone, ask yourself, can I take on more? And if the answer is yes, what does that look like? What does more look like? Does it look like video podcasts? Does it look like working on blog posts? Because now I have keepgettingafter.com. I also want to allow others to read my writings because I love to write. And I feel like I get my message best across to others when I'm writing. And so it's come from this podcast where I started in my basement in Saratoga Springs at my kitchen table to where now I'm building a studio. I have a website. I write blogs. I have a decent social following. People reach out to me and tell me that they are doing things that they're proud of. My mom reached out to me the other day and said, hey, I ran 5.3 miles today. And I said, hell yeah, baby, let's go. My mom is almost 60. She's a beast. And I love hearing these kind of things of people sharing their stories about what they're doing to get after it. I've coached my brother. I've coached my cousin. I've coached my wife. I've coached my brother's wife. I've coached my friends, like in running, not like life coach. I don't really do that stuff. But it's so rewarding to see them succeed and to learn from lessons that I've gone through myself and help them avoid. And it's just, the podcast started as just that, a podcast. Now getting after it is a movement. Getting after it is not just a lifestyle. It is a commitment to becoming the best that you can be. Because once you get after a goal, once you see that goal through till the end, you best be finding something else to go challenge yourself, because that's the whole damn point of getting after it, is consistently trying to push yourself in the right direction. always evaluating your actions to make sure that they are aligned with your goals and they're moving you towards them. It is a dance between being proud of what you have, evaluating your decisions, and seeing where you can improve. Because if you don't take time to celebrate the small wins, then you might not be as happy or content with the work that you're doing, and it might lead to burnout. You might give up. So find ways that you can be a little bit more proud of the work that you do. Here's the mantra that we're going to talk about a little bit. This is the mantra. Consistency with purpose. Be consistent, but with purpose. With this show, the whole purpose is to make sure that if there is someone out there who wants to have someone who believes in them, that they can rely on me, that they can take some of the lessons that I've learned, apply it to their lives, and realize that they are made for greatness, because every single soul on earth has greatness in them. Some people's actions do not determine that. They do not dictate that or reflect it. But everyone has greatness in them, and that is something I am so passionate about. I believe in everyone. Sometimes you have to make some serious changes, and there are some evil people out there. They might have lost their chance to be great. But you who are listening to this have not. And if I can get that message across to anyone, if I could show them who I was 3.5 years ago at 135 pounds, I was weak as hell. I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't run. I wasn't strong. I didn't have a podcast. I was not happy in my career, to where I am now, a married man who runs ultra marathons and has a 100th episode podcast and works at the job of his dreams. There's hope for everyone. Because when I was sick, when I was in that phase, I thought life was going to be that way forever. I thought I was going to be stuck in bed, depressed, hurting, fatigued forever. And my life looked dark. That's the purpose of this podcast, is to teach people who are like that, to let them rely on me, because I've gone through some horrible experiences like that you can do the same thing. And it doesn't have to be a podcast. It doesn't have to be running. But whatever goal you have in mind, if it's playing the piano, if it's painting, if it's being a better husband or wife or a better father, whatever the goal is that you have for yourself, you can do it. It seems daunting now. I understand that. But if you are consistent with purpose, it'll come quicker than you think. I like the idea that you measure in hundreds. And what that means is, like, with this podcast, you measure it by the 100th episode. So the next time I can do that would be 200 episodes, right? But you measure in great quantities. And for you, it could be years, it could be months, it could be weeks. But measure where you're at. And if you need to improve, do it. If you don't, be proud and keep doing it. But have purpose, because it's not about just mindless repetition. Consistency is not about that. It's more about relentless refinement. Be relentless. And I love Tim Grover's book. If you haven't read Relentless, you probably should. It's about Michael Jordan, Kobe, and Dwayne Wade. Their trainer, his name's Tim Grover. He talks about being relentless with your goals and just wanting to win at all costs. Sometimes that's good. Other times it's bad. But if you want to be relentlessly consistent and relentlessly refine your capabilities, just watch who you become in a couple years. Because, like I said, and I'm sorry I keep going back to this, but it's a profound example for me. That 135-pound kid 3.5 years ago would not ever have imagined him running an ultra marathon. And now I do. But it's because I've been relentlessly refining everything that I do. My habits, my strategies for growth on this podcast, the podcast itself. I try to refine it as much as I can. This is a huge passion of mine. if I haven't gotten it clear through your head today, I want to do it again. You have greatness in you. You can do anything. If it's achievable by a human being, you can do it too. And it might seem so daunting, and the road might not look like there is a path at all. But if you stay in the fight and you ask yourself, are my actions worth repeating on a regular basis, if not daily, then you will make strides that you never imagined. And you will do things that you couldn't even comprehend a couple years ago. Purposeful consistency builds momentum, and it helps you overcome those plateaus when they come. If you listen to the last podcast, I talk a lot about roadblocks, and they will come up. But that consistency helps with that momentum. And when those roadblocks come up, you're able to take one step and push yourself and keep going. You need to celebrate the progress and the wins along the way to fuel your long-term motivation. Like the blog post, the website itself, the newsletter that I have, that was a huge milestone for me. And it seemed like a small thing. Like I write a lot, but I just now publish them. And, just burped. And a website, it's a lot of work, but you can crank it out in a couple hours. Anyways, the key isn't about doing the same thing every day. It's doing the right thing better every single time. So when you are evaluating your decisions, your strategy, your whatever, make sure that you are self-aware and that you are intentionally staying consistent. Intentionality has a huge impact on any goal that you're trying to accomplish. Make sure you're intentional with your goals. Make sure there is a why behind it, because that intention is a little bit easier found when the time comes around. And here's what I want you to do today. This week, share one habit or strategy that you're finding with me. Share it with me, either through an email, on social media, or in the comments of this podcast. You can leave it on Spotify. But I want to celebrate your progress together with me. Because when you start auditing your habits, you refine your systems, and you keep getting after it day by day and step by step, that's how you build the life that you've always wanted. It's how you build a life of purpose, of achievement, and of meaning. Getting after it, this podcast, it's been a huge milestone. 100 episodes is something I couldn't have imagined reaching without that consistency. And more importantly, that purposeful consistency. And the same is true for any meaningful goal in life. It's not just about showing up every day. Like I said, it's not just about those repetitions. It's about refining your actions every single time. And I'm not saying that this podcast is a huge success. 100 episodes, many people have done that before me. But for me on my own journey and my own growth goals, it's a big one. And I'm proud of the work that I've done. And the same goes for you. Like 3 years down the road, do you want to look back and be proud of what you have? Because I am now. I mean, when I first started the podcast, like, let me tell you, there were so many times where I had imposter syndrome. That was probably one of the biggest roadblocks I had to overcome. Because I was this, 25-year-old kid when I started. I'm 27 now, so I'm not that much older. But I was like, who's going to listen to me? Who thinks I have good things to say or share? I was 24. I'm this little 24-year-old kid who's gone through a couple tough things. And now it's become something where I'm always refining myself. I'm asking if my actions are getting me one step closer to my goal. I'm learning as much as I ever have in my entire life because I'm doing what I can to learn or to read and listen to other people's podcasts, get other people's opinions, and then share that with you. And the reason I'm doing this 100th episode is to celebrate the progress of this podcast. I mean, you could celebrate with me, but this is kind of for myself. To talk about how I'm proud of what I've done, because there were times when I to be honest, didn't want to keep doing this podcast because I thought I was being an imposter. And I was worried about what other people thought. But once I realized that this journey is my own, once I realized that this podcast is something that I want for me, and I want to teach people these lessons, then it changed and it shifted the narrative to be a little bit more focused on, okay, Brett, you get as good as you can be. You share that message with other people. You try and build them up. And if you're proud of the work that you've done, if you think that what you're doing is helping someone, at least one person, then pat yourself on the back because you're reaching your goal. And that's my whole aim. That's the purpose. And I have to be consistent with a purpose. And so do you, to reach your goals. I am so grateful that you've joined me on this journey. It's not stopping. This isn't a breakup letter, guys. This is only the beginning of the podcast. Like I said, I'm giving myself 10 years. If I can't get it figured out in 10 years, then maybe I'll throw in the towel. But for now, no way, Jose. You got me for a while. We're only just beginning. And same goes for you guys. Like, I really do appreciate you being with me through this whole thing. And if you're starting something and you're just in the beginning phases, just realize that if you can be consistent with a purpose and relentlessly refine your actions, you'll make strides that you never thought possible. I've seen it in my life. I've seen it in countless others. My brother Drew, who lost 50 pounds from training and running and being a little more clean with his diet, he's made insane strides. But there were weeks when he was feeling like he was making no progress. You're making progress. You just don't see it, guys. If you learn anything from me, I want you to learn that if you are consistent with a purpose, you will make progress. And it doesn't matter how small it is on a day-to-day basis. Progress looks small day by day. But year by year, it looks pretty big. Decade by decade looks even bigger. Well, honestly, thank you from the bottom of my heart. It's been fun for me, and I've grown so much, and I can't wait to see where I'm at in 200 episodes. So until next time, everyone, find something that you're passionate about. Work on a goal that you want to get better at, and then refine your actions to get you there. As always, reach out to me on social media, hit me up, do whatever you got to do, but keep getting after it, my friends.